The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, or CMMC, has an update to reduce and streamline the system. Those changes could have big impacts for federal contractors. Eric Crusius is a partner at Holland Knight. Eric, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Is CMMC 2.0 good news for contractors?
I'd say it's good news in a couple of ways. One, for folks who don't have really high-level information from DoD, they don't have to go for a full third-party certification. Now they have a self-certification. So that will lower costs for contractors. There's also simplicity in the model. So the old model had a bunch of bespoke requirements in it. Now they're just really relying on existing requirements like NIST Special Publication 800-171 and the FAR clause that's already there. So in some ways, that's pretty good news for contractors.
And is it significant that the levels have been reduced from 5 levels down to 3 levels?
There's some significance, and that goes to your previous question on simplicity. It's a little bit easier now to kind of track these things. The levels 2 and levels 4, the previous levels 2 and 4, were not really much of anything. They were kind of way stops to the higher levels 3 and 5. But I think it makes things a little bit simpler now that there are only 3 levels.
There's also self-certification. How does that work?
So that's kind of one of the more interesting parts about this. So level 1 was previously a third-party certification, and now it's just a self-certification. And actually part of level 3 is also self-certifying. But the interesting thing is that somebody in the C-suite has to certify on an annual basis that the company is compliant with whatever the requirements are. And that's a lot to ask of somebody in the C-suite who doesn't have their hands on what the technology is and whether there's compliance or not. So there's a higher risk of things like False Claims Act and things like that because you have a company certifying to something, whereas before you kind of bought off your risk by putting it on a third party who was certifying you. If the third party said you were okay, you're okay. So if somebody complains, no big deal, or not much of a deal.
So what's the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative?
So that was something that came up. It's funny how all these things are working in concert with each other. I don't think it's an accident at all. But a few weeks before the new self-certification requirements were announced, the Department of Justice announced that they're going to look really closely at contractors who are certifying to cybersecurity standards and really aggressively looking at whether those certifications are made in good faith and civilly going after those contractors that are not doing so under the False Claims Act. So you had that come out first, and then we had CMMC 2.0, which rolled out a self-certification. Probably no accident at all with that. So
if they do get a third-party assessment, does that mean that they're no longer liable for any errors?
I think the risk is a lot lower. I would say it's not a blanket no, but if you bring an assessor in, you show them your entire system, they go through the checklist, and they say, yes, you deserve to be certified, you're compliant with this standard, and then a year or two later, there's a cybersecurity breach, and all those same systems are in place, there's a lot less kind of liability on the contractor because of that, because you had a third party come in and say it was okay, as opposed to you self-certifying and then that happens. DoD is going to take a very strong interest probably in what happened in DOJ too. If you have self-certified that you're fine and then there's a cybersecurity breach based on something that was missing in your systems.
So does this put smaller contractors at a disadvantage because they might not be able to pay for the third-party certifications? That's
kind of been the argument of CMMC all along, why it wasn't working properly or why the shortfalls in it. But in some respects, it's kind of necessary. DoD has long seen that contractors have not been living up to the standards they've been putting in their contracts. Contractors are signing these contracts with these clauses in them. And these clauses require the contractors to have these systems in place, and DoD thinks these systems are really not in place. So now that's why they brought this third-party certification in. So small businesses are at a disadvantage because they're going to bear a substantial cost of this. But DoD feels like there's not really any choice in this matter because they've tried to go the self-certification way, and it hasn't really worked. We've had significant cybersecurity breaches since then. So now they're trying something that will hopefully stop that.
So CMMC 1.0 is suspended. 2.0 has not taken effect yet. What are contractors supposed to be doing right now?
So contractors should really be getting ready for 2.0 by getting their systems up to where they should be in general. There are already existing requirements in place. So if you're going for what's the new level 2, which is consistent with NIST Special Publication 800-171, you're already signing contracts probably with that requirement in it. So you're kind of essentially already self-certifying. So really examine that. And you're also probably certifying under a DoD database that requires you to say how many of those 110 controls you're compliant with. So look to make sure your certifications are consistent, and look to make sure your systems are ready to go when 2.0 is ready to go.
Eric, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.